Hello everybody, this is Danny from Deep South Homestead, coming to you from my studio room. We've got the ceiling put in, having to smell the paint smell here this morning. And yes, I have a jacket on here inside my studio room. It's like 45 degrees outside. We did not build a fire. Our only heat for our house is wood heat, and the studio room is separate from the other part of the house, so the temperature inside my studio room this morning is in the low 50s. So I've got a little light jacket on here this morning, and that's one of the things that prompted me to do this video. It's kind of a strange thing, guys. Here we are in the deep south, going into the middle of April, and it's still in the low 40s here. And guess what? Next week, they have us scheduled to go down to 39 to 40 degrees. That is almost unheard of. Which is, well, actually the rest of the week's going to be in the low 40s in the morning here also. So some of you may know this and some of you may not know this, but there was a period in history that was called the year without a summer. It was kind of shocking to me when I first discovered this, because I really had never even thought about it. I mean, I knew that we were headed into what they're calling a mini ice age, global cooling and stuff like this. I knew that. I've been watching this through several channels, and I've been looking at the way the sun was doing through different sites, the things going on with the solar flares and the cooling of the sun, the solar minimums, the grand solar minimums, the Dalton minimums, all these type things. I've been reading up and looking at all these things for quite some time now. Plus, I also keep records myself for many years. And over the over the last several years, I've noticed that my records were changing drastically from year to year. Now, there was for a period of time we got extremely hot because the sun was kicking off so many solar flares. It was just unreal. The solar winds were blowing extremely strong from the sun. The heating was just unreal here. There was one year we went through 100 days in a row that the temperature was over 100 degrees here. And that was just a couple of years ago. But the big game changer came last year for me. When I normally, and I've mentioned this before, I normally leave my pickup truck sitting on my carport. And during the month of September, I move it because the sun gets so hot on it sitting on that concrete there. I'll back it up under a shade that's right behind it. This past year, well, the year of 2016, the year of 2017 is when I began to notice the changes. 2016, I noticed that the carport only had half a shade on it. I had half a shade shading it, and I was like, did the trees around grow that much? And I looked, and no, the trees hadn't grown that much, because there was only just very minimal new growth on it because they're large trees. Then 2017 came, and that was the big change for me that made me start looking. The year of 2017, the sun never hit my carport. And when that happened, I knew that the sun was in a different spot than where it normally is, because the trees had not grown any that year. And whenever I started doing my research, the first thing I did was, I'll tell you, I went up to the Arctic Circle. There's actually a tribe of people that live up there, and I'm not going to give all these links and stuff like that, guys. This is just a talk, okay? There's a tribe. You can Google it and hunt it up yourself, because I did. There's a tribe of people that lived up there that completely depend on the sun for their seasons, because if they don't know exactly when their seasons are coming and going, the ancient people, then they starve to death. And these people have survived for centuries up in that cold climate by looking at the sun and knowing where it's at and how much time they have and what kind of winters they're going to have and how their food source is going to go. And the ancient elderly people were saying the sun moved. It was no longer in the same location, and they were kind of panicking because they didn't know how they were going to survive, because now all their historical things that they had done was changing. Well, when I saw that, that's what prompted me to start looking into the changes going on in our world. And supposedly now the earth has tilted off its axis some few degrees, which is putting the sun in a completely different location on the face of the earth, which is supposedly, based on some grand solar minimums that's taking place, going to put us into another mini ice age over the next several years. Now, guys, this is nothing new. I've been doing lots of studies in this stuff, and I'm probably not going to remember everything accurately. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. But this has happened before. As a matter of fact, it's happened several times before. Now, the year without a summer was the year of 1816. Now, that's only been a couple hundred years ago. But that year, there was no summer. Now, how hard is that to think of? That winter lasted all year long. Well, guys, what happened is during the 1400s, leading up to this period, we had gone through what was called a mini ice age, because for a couple of centuries there, the earth had begun to cool down because of low sun activity. And in 1816, the climate began to change drastically. We went into what was called a Dalton minimum. And at this time, people did not know what we know now. They did not know what was causing everything. Well, even though we was in this Dalton minimum, guys, there was a few things that led up to what caused a year without a summer. Now, previously to 1816, according to my understanding, for many years prior to that, there had been several volcanic eruptions that had taken place in different parts of the earth, spewing ash up into the atmospheres and changing the climate in lots of different areas on the face of the earth. Now, the big deal came in 1815 when Mount Tambora erupted. When Mount Tambora erupted, this was supposedly the largest eruption in mankind. It happened in I forget how many thousands of years. It was way back. This was the largest eruption that had taken place. And it spewed so much volcanic ash up into the atmosphere that it was called a volcanic winter, is actually what began to happen in 1815. And it carried over into 1816 because this ash was so high up in the air and got into the high altitudes of the stratospheres that what happened was in Europe, if you go back and do the studies in lots of places in Europe, when it snowed, they had brown snow, they had orange snow, they had red snow, they had all these different things. And what happened was it stopped the sunlight from being able to reach the Earth's atmosphere, thus causing global cooling. Well, guys, it didn't only affect Europe. Even though it affected Europe really bad, it also affected our country over here in the United States. I think they said that after this happened, and I've read so much, guys, that please don't quote me on any one thing directly because I could forget something, that the temperature actually dropped some 3 degrees. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when the Earth's temperature drops 3 degrees, that's massive, because I've read where if the ocean temperature changes 1 degree, then it can cause cataclysmic events as far as storms are concerned. Now, the biggest event with this was not just the fact that it was a year without a summer. The ones that suffered the most from this was those that were in the northern climates in New Hampshire area, New England, Canada, northwestern coastlines and stuff like that. These are the ones who suffered the most because it wasn't the fact that it was so cold, because people up there are used to dealing with long cold winters. It wasn't the cold factor, according to what history tells us. What it was the food shortages, because the cold lasted longer than it should. In New Hampshire, sheep were dying from just exposure to extreme colds. Crops were failing everywhere simply because they could not get anything up and get it growing long enough for it to mature. Now, just south of these regions in there was places where they were able to get some of the grains and some of the corns to grow and be able to sustain it. But the problem during that particular period in history was there was not enough railroad systems and there was not enough transportation systems to get food from the southern areas up into the northern areas. And as a result, hundreds of thousands of people died from starvation, not only in America, but in Europe also. I mean, guys, this is very much a reality and can happen again should this grand solar minimum continue to escalate like it is. I mean, how many of y'all are sitting there at home right now? Normally you have your crops out by now and growing, and you still have frozen ground. I mean, guys, look, I was looking in Arkansas. Arkansas has just lost the biggest portion of their blueberries, apples, peaches, crops, because they all bloomed out and everything, and then they had hard freezes come through and wiped out half of Arkansas's fruit crop already this year. Just like when this year without a summer took place, food prices over doubled and then tripled, and some of them quadrupled, and poor people could not afford to purchase food during that time, and thus many of them had to migrate. This played a big factor in the development of America. When people were moving west and moving south, they were looking for fertile land. They were looking for warmer climates during the early 1800s, trying to escape this cold that had happened. I mean, it was, back then, like I said, they did not know what was going on. There's actually many artists that painted paintings during that time depicting the colors of the sky. The sky would be orange looking, and different colors of different colors that artists pictured and painted of the sky during that time because of the volcanic ash that had got locked up in the upper atmosphere, preventing the sun from reaching the earth. And guys, there's no reason today why we could not have another major volcanic eruption, and it already as cool as it is, to make this phenomenon, if you want to call it that, actually happen again. We're already seeing Mount Mayon over in the Philippines has already erupted, and let me tell you something. Just prior to this Tambora erupting, Mount Mayon in the Philippines erupted right before it did in 1815, I'm sorry. The fact that I'm seeing this volcano over in the Philippines starting to become active again makes me wonder, could this be possible again, that this could happen? Now, in the spring and summer of 1816, there was a persistent, they called it a dry fog, that just would not go away. It kept persisting, and it dimmed the sunlight. And when it dimmed the sunlight, it prevented the earth from actually warming up from the sun. And it was actually visible to the naked eye, the different colors and things that this fog was causing. Now, it was characterized, or has been characterized, let me say that, today as a stratospheric sulfur aerosol type fog. And it's highly unusual when these things happen. Now, I keep looking out the window, guys, because I'm in my studio room and I can see my whole back hill back here, and I see how cold looking it is on everything out there, and all my vegetables are growing, and I'm just praying to my Father above that that and asking him to preserve my crops through all this cold weather that's coming, that I won't get a frost and actually kill something here at the Deep South. Now, I'm just doing this because I care about each and every one of us in this homestead community. We've got to take this kind of thing seriously. We've got to ramp up our food supply, because right now, if you go and look in Europe right now, I've been looking over in Europe at some things that's happening. They've already lost a big portion of their food supply in Europe because of the freezes this year. Now that's kind of frightening, because that means they got to ship food from somewhere else to compensate for that. Also, food prices in other places in the country, or other food crops, let me say that, in other parts of the country has suffered drastically, and therefore the prices of food is now almost fixing to start doubling in some places. I know the state of Florida, citrus crops and stuff that suffered so much damage from the hurricanes last year, and then they got freezes early this year, and it has done so much damage to the citrus crops in Florida that prices are beginning to almost double this year. Beef prices, I've been told by specific ones inside certain groups, that beef prices are fixing to take a huge jump because of what's going on in the trade wars right now between us and China. Much of our infrastructure, things like fencing, fence posts and stuff like that, are made in China and all shipped to the U.S. are fixing to go expensively outrageous in prices because of new tariffs that's being put on everything. Guys, being a homesteader is fixing to get really real, and it's fixing to get really tough. A lot of people just play garden. They go out and they put a few little plants in the ground and they call themselves gardening, and I'm not backing that. If that's all you can do, then get out there and do it. But those people who claim that they survive off of that, and yet they spend most of their time at grocery stores each weekend buying food to supplement that, then guys, it's time for us to wake up and get real with this. Now there's lots of people who are talking about putting in greenhouses and asking my opinion. I think that if you're up north and you can't get away from up there and just where you're going to be spending your time, then yeah, you need to be putting in greenhouses. Because I think if this thing keeps going like they're saying, it's going to only get colder for the next 7 to 15 years. And then it's going to take a long time after that to come out of it. So we're going to have to pray to the good Lord above to give us the wisdom and the knowledge we need to be able to survive this coming cataclysmic event of a grand solar minimum. And guys, this is not man-made. I mean, granted, we've done some things to the atmosphere. I'm not going to knock that. We have done a lot of damage to our Earth through use of different chemicals sprayed in the atmospheres and stuff like that. I watched some videos last night of a guy who actually showed a machine they had set up that was blowing this type of chemical fog into the atmosphere. And he said within a matter of hours, as this stuff evaporates up into the atmosphere, he said it's going to be coming down a rainstorm here in just a matter of a couple of hours. And as he stood there and watched that stuff go up into the atmosphere, in a couple of hours, the sky started getting black, and the next thing he knew, it just started pouring down raining. Totally amazing, totally man-made. It blew my mind to watch what we can do with the atmosphere by seeding clouds. But guys, during this year without a summer, they was all the way down as far as West Virginia. There was frosts in every month of the year throughout that year. There was a period in time when Thomas Jefferson himself, when he retired, actually had to quit gardening where he was and actually move from there in order to keep gardening. It's been said that the wind blew out of the east for over 3 months, keeping the atmosphere from actually warming up and staying cold during this whole time. There was so many things, if you go back and read and do the historical study on a year without a summer, and I'm not even touching the tip of the iceberg, guys. I'm just hitting a few highlights is all I'm doing. It was more cataclysmic than anything I'm talking about. Look, hundreds of thousands of people died worldwide because of this event. And that's why I'm telling my homestead friends on here, guys, ramp up food supplies. Because look, in Europe, when this happened, there were food riots everywhere. People were murdered, killed. There was all kinds of things that took place. There is nothing to say that this cannot happen again. And just imagine now, this is in 1816. The population was not as heavy as it is now. People were not as dependent on the government then as they are now. I mean, now you let an EBT machine go down in a store somewhere and they just riot and loot the whole store and walk out with food because they're like, well, I got to have food for my children and stuff like that. Well, you let it happen now and you see how quickly people turn to savages. We think people were barbaric back in the early centuries. No, you're going to see some barbaric people when their little machines don't work, when they punch their cards through and they can't get what they want, or your credit card don't work, or your ATM machine don't work, and all these things. That then, when you can't get food for you and your family, that's when you're going to start seeing the barbaric, humanistic traits come out in people. And it's at that point you're going to be wishing that you were somewhere other than where you are if you're in a bad place. And guys, this is a very real scenario that can happen. Now, y'all have always told me on here, Danny, if you see anything coming that you think is important, let us know. Please do not hold back. And guys, I'm putting this out there because I believe in my own personal heart, based on historical studies and based on history and based on science, based on what I see in my own records here in the Deep South, this is real. It's going to happen. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to be able to survive if there was a year without a summer? Could you make it if there was a year without a summer? Because you see, guys, it can happen. It has already happened. That's why I know it can happen, because it has already happened. Now, it's just trying to figure out where I need to go with this, guys. I mean, it's so heart-wrenching to think that a large base of my subscribers is in the northern climates. And when I say that, my heart just bleeds, because I'm like, what would you do? Could you survive? Now, here at Deep South Homestead, we're focusing more now on cooler weather crops. We're still going to do some of our warm weather crops, but we're going to begin to ramp up seeds for more cooler weather crops. And I know some of y'all have asked me questions, are there tomatoes that can grow in cooler weather? There are some hybrids out there that can stand cooler weather, but there are none that I know of that can withstand frosties and freezes. Now, you've got one that's called Early Girl that can be grown up north, and there's several others there that are hybrids. But the only problem with that is you can't save your seeds from it. And if you're going to survive a coming ice age, you're going to need things that you can save seeds from. You're going to have heirloom varieties. You're going to have to learn about cross-pollination, so that if you plant certain things, they won't cross-pollinate and lose your variety of seeds. You're going to have to learn to study up on your genus names so that you know what is what and what will pollinate and what will not cross-pollinate. These are things that you're going to have to learn if you're going to survive the coming things that this earth is fixing to face. And one of the reasons I know that this could very well possibly be real is in God's Word. It says in the last days of an age that the earth will go through what's called birthing pains. Now, as a woman in travail giving childbirth, you ladies out there that's listening to me know what that's like if you've had children. And what that's saying is that the earth is going to be hurting because of what's going on in it. There's going to be volcanic eruptions, the Bible says. The Bible says there's going to be earthquakes in diverse places, which means different places. Wake up, Oklahoma, Nebraska, all you places up in there. From fracking, you're having all these earthquakes in weird places, Kentucky, all up in there. They're having tremors and stuff like that. Even in my own state of Mississippi, we've had earthquakes, minimal ones, in Jackson, Mississippi. So I'm paying attention to these things, and it's not just based on science alone. I'm throwing in God's Word with it, because God's Word tells us a lot of things are going to happen. There's going to be famines. There's going to be pestilences. Guys, we keep asking, how are we going to have famine? Well, hey, if you get another year without a summer come through, you're looking at a famine. So, guys, I'm not going to keep going here because I got to get out. I got a ton of things to do this morning before the bad weather moves in this weekend. Supposedly, we're supposed to have some real severe weather moving in here Saturday. Up north, supposed to have more blizzard weather coming through. Supposed to be more cold, more snow, more frost, more freezing weather, more sleet. And guys, I feel for y'all not being able to get your crops in, but I've got to try to make sure my crops are protected from severe winds and severe flooding and stuff like that, and try to make sure everything's as taken care of as I can. So I got to get off of here and get busy doing that. But I felt like it was necessary for me to come on here and do this video. I felt like it's very informative because most of y'all may not know about the year without a summer. Thank you from Deep South Homestead.